Data-driven web design, could anything sound more dull? Yet I think this could be a third and important theme of this blog and key to my attempts to improve my business. Before I move on to what it is and what it solves, let me first recap on the other two main themes of this blog, which are agile working and the KISS principle. These two philosophies have helped me come a long way in understanding what can go wrong with web design. Agile reminds us that fixing the outcome of a project in advance can be problematic. Knowledge comes through the process and outside influences need responding to. Keep it simple, stupid reminds us not to distract from the clarity of the message or to add unnecessary complexity that makes it harder to adapt to change and maintain. What I feel has been missing is a simple way to explain what many of us are trying to do for clients. Something which distinguishes us from those selling websites as a more templated commodity. So what is data-driven design? You're going to see different definitions, but here are two. Data-driven design can be defined as a decision-making approach to the design process that heavily relies on collected data about customers' behavior and attitude, information about how customers interact with your design, acts as feedback that informs you whether your design fulfills its purpose. And data-driven design uses UX research methods such as surveys, usability testing, behavior flows, and tracking analytics on websites. I think of it essentially as a commitment to working with facts rather than opinions. We often can't escape the politics that creates design by committee, but we might be able to steer it into something more productive. Data-driven design isn't just number crunching. Qualitative data is equally as important, and the information can come from existing sites or any evidence-based research that can be used to test a hypothesis. You might be thinking that agile methodologies already tend to employ this with its iterative testing approach, and you'd be right. However, it's a part of individual methodologies rather than in the agile philosophy itself. As freelancers and small agencies, we're less likely to get clients who will commit someone to being permanently active in, say, a Scrum team. And even if they do, this concept might help explain the approach to those out of the loop. Give us the problem rather than the solution. I'm sure everyone who's done client websites for a while will have hit a point where the client wants something we feel will do them more harm than good. And it's a dilemma. How do we tell the person paying us that their idea is not sensible without putting them on the defensive? Saying we are the experts only make us look the opposite. Do we honor the slogan of good service and conclude that the customer is always right? Again, tricky. Our knowledge is the value that we bring to projects. We also might find ourselves later being responsible for problems that we didn't flag up. So how does this happen? Perhaps it begins with the first thing clients generally say to me, which is, I need a website. In 2011, I decided I didn't want to build client websites. I attended a course on Google Analytics aimed at business owners, and I got booed for introducing myself then as an aspiring web designer. Those who attended this course had their sites built by web designers, and they were there because it didn't give them the business they were expecting. What I learned as the day went on was that none of the course attendees had actually asked for traffic and conversions. They got what they asked for, a website. They came with the solution, not the problem, and they weren't actually happy with their designers at the time. Naturally, I found their view of our profession depressing, but equally their new solution to find out more about web traffic. It's just one component in an online marketing strategy. How would these busy business owners find time to join the dots together? And strategies are quite confusing. Occasionally I'm very pleased with chats I've had with clients. They're nodding enthusiastically at my explanations of how the web is different to traditional marketing, how keyword and competitor research can impact on traffic, how conversion techniques can overcome visitors bouncing and never returning, etc. And I thought I've brought clarity to a multiple discipline subject that's taken me years to digest, and perhaps I have for a little while, but when I stopped talking a century of mass media culture is likely to kick in, and usually it's only a matter of time before suggestions are coming in that seem to run counter to what I thought we'd agreed. So when in doubt, keep it simple. What I like about data-driven web design is that it's a term that perhaps sums up an ideal way of working, something more memorable to clients than having to remember an entire online marketing strategy. I suspect the term could be replaced with results-based or experimental or research-based design. There is a 2006 book free to read on Google Books by the US Department of Health and Human Services called Research-Based Web Design and Usability Guidelines. The book is dated, but it seems to have the same aim of not having decisions made entirely subjectively, or equally as bad, only based on expert opinion. Of course, expert knowledge is important, but if we're going a more scientific route, we should be seeking to falsify our theories. And most experts end up with more questions than they have answers, but at least they are very good questions. What does data-driven web design look like? As with Agile, the philosophy is clear, but the methodology isn't. Personally, I like to visualize the design process as layers that make up a user experience. I'll expand upon this in later posts, but a basic overview could look something like this. So starting with number one, strategy. This tends to begin with clarifying what a company does, for whom, and what it stands for. We're essentially part of the storytelling process for visitor and the brand alike. But that's not much use if nothing's going to get seen. So often my first concern is with where is the traffic going to come from. And we can look to existing data and do keyword and competitor analysis to see what our best chances are in search. With some industries, what they're offering might typically not have enough people who are searching for it, and then an emphasis might be better placed on social media or even offline promotion, and that could be a priority in the spending of the overall budget. This acknowledgement, I think, offers a way to turn the client's initial solution, I want a website, into a research question about what it needs to do in the overall strategy. And I'm keen to do this to counter their possible assumption that I'll be just trying to get as much business from them as I can, which really is the truth, but I'd rather that was based on data rather than just something that I'm thinking up ahead of having any data to look at. Next, we might move on to number two, the structure. With the data gathered, it could give us some clues on the structure of the content. Recently, on a client project, I noticed there was a familiar structure among clients. In fact, on the existing site I was redesigning, most seem to have followed a common website template of the time, with a hero section followed by 3 or 4 boxes which are clickable to other main pages. To fill these in, most have structured the content into types of people their industry serves. What the data told us was literally no one searches by type. They search for what they are interested in. There's no sensible reason for us to follow the same structure. If we did, we'd be letting a design trend lead the strategy, not the other way round. Then we might move on to number 3, web copy stroke messaging, although messaging is probably something we'll cover in strategy. With the structure in place and the keywords known, it's probably logical to start writing the copy. If someone's been brought in for this, they'll probably understand how copy needs to be visually grouped and be scannable, and needs to take a visitor on a journey that encourages them to hit on that call to action button. If we're doing it ourselves, there's no shortage of research and frameworks by people who do conversion experiments and copywriting, and we can use these with clients to turn their words into something that will have an impact on their target audience. And then lastly, we might move to the visual design, which may not entirely come last. There may already be some branding in place. If we're lucky, that might already come with some kind of strategy. But as there is no right or wrong with personal aesthetics, data-driven decisions can really come into their own here to help us focus on the target audience, but also to show that good-looking and instinctive design follows certain principles. Once we have our words and our content and basic structure on a page. It's mostly just a case of adding emphasis to key areas and reducing the cognitive friction for visitors. We can do that from a data-driven understanding of how humans process and group information. And there's no shortage of scientific theory on how to use space, alignment and proximity, on fonts and typography and color as well. Of course, these alone will not make up for the instincts of a designer. But there is a way to make the process transparent so clients have a basis for their feedback and contributions and will not just go in blindly altering things. Of course, I'm only scratching at the surface here. My example process is simplified. I don't even mention ways to get qualitative data on visitors. And in many ways, there's nothing new here. The very first traditional design process I experienced over a decade ago when working for the UK government, the aim there was trying to make the subjective objective and a process that was transparent. Also, many of my clients, there will not be much testing going on at all. The cost won't be justifiable. But the key thing for me here is that I want something that better explains for clients what we are aiming for professionally, why UX is much more than the look of a website, why we don't need to reinvent the wheel each time, and how randomly copying cool elements from other websites is a Frankenstein monster approach. As always, I'm really interested in your thoughts. Thank you if you've got to the end of this, and I hope to see you in another video. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.